are these people?
As I said earlier, I held on to this story for a minute, and I'm kind of glad I did. But I kind of wanted to talk about this as this is somewhat important to me given my heritage. So Benin, which is a country in West Africa, is granting citizenship to descendants of slaves. So Ghana had a similar program in recognition of 500 years post Atlantic slave trade that
Which
they
was
were
like
offering or
recently, right? If I remember correct.
Yes. I think back in 2022, I believe they started this. So, but basically it's an opportunity for family or descendants of Africa who are looking to obtain citizenship in concurrence to their identity as to where they were in the continent, gives them the opportunity to get citizenship. So Ghana has had this program for a minute. Benin is also offering this program as well to anyone who can prove their ancestry within the region, I would say. So we're going to go into it, tell a little bit more, and we'll break it down a little bit more. And then I want this to relate to something that kind of went viral while we went over break that I do have some thoughts about. So I will get into that later. So let's find out a little bit more about this citizenship offer.
Okay, working on it.
Benin, a West African country historically linked to the transatlantic slave trade, has passed a law granting citizenship to descendants of those who were enslaved and taken from Africa. This new law, introduced in September, aims to acknowledge the country's painful past and offer a symbolic form of reparation to those with ancestral ties to the slave trade. The law is open to individuals over 18 who can trace their lineage to enslaved Africans, including through DNA tests, family records, or verified testimonies. Nadege Anelka, a 57-year-old travel agent from Martinique, is one of the first to apply for citizenship under this law. She found herself feeling a deep connection to Benin's culture and people when she visited in 2023 and decided to settle there. Anelka, who traced her ancestry to slaves in Martinique using the Anchoukage website, hopes to become a citizen as part of her broader efforts to reclaim her heritage. If successful, she will receive provisional citizenship for 3 years, requiring a visit to Benin during that time to gain full status. While Benin is not the first country to offer citizenship to descendants of enslaved Africans, Ghana made similar moves recently. The law in Benin is especially significant due to the country's history as a major slave trade hub. The coastal city of Ouidah was one of the busiest slave ports in Africa, and an estimated 1.5 million people were deported from the Bight of Benin. The country's royal kingdoms played an active role in capturing and selling slaves to European merchants for centuries. The law also reflects Benin's ongoing efforts to reconcile with its history. Over the years, the country has acknowledged its role in the slave trade, unlike many other African nations. In the 1990s, Benin hosted an international conference on the slave trade, and in 1999, President Matthew Karikou issued a public apology for Africa's involvement. Today, the government also promotes memorial tourism to educate the world about the legacy of the slave trade. In Ouidah, significant sites such as the Door of No Return and the Tree of Forgetfulness stand as somber reminders of the horrors enslaved people endured. For many, the law is a chance to reconnect with lost heritage. Nate Debos, an American musician, discovered the law while attending Benin's Vodun Festival, which celebrates the country's traditional religious practices linked to African spiritualism. Debos, who is president of the New Orleans National Vodou Day Association, sees the connection between the Vodun religion in Benin and the version practiced in the Americas through slavery. He plans to apply for citizenship as a way to strengthen cultural ties but intends to remain based in the U.S. Anelka, while aware that she will never fully be considered Beninese, views her citizenship application as a form of personal reparation. For her, it is a way to honor the memory of her ancestors and reclaim a part of her heritage long lost to history.
Yeah. So, actually, if you go back in,
Yep.
we're going to talk about these two, Amanelka and Nate, a little bit more in this Associate Press article. Gives a little more context to both of them. So this article was written. Wait. Oh yeah.
I got it. Sorry. My mistake.
No, I'm forgetting screens.
Yep.
This was written by Mark Banchereau. who writes, Benin grants citizenship to, you can zoom out, to slave descendants as it faces its own role in trade. So Mark writes, when the judge Anelka first came to the West African country of Benin from her home island of Martinique, that's in the French overseas territory in the Caribbean, the 57-year-old travel agent said she had a feeling of deja vu. A lot of the people reminded me of my grandparents, the way they wore their headscarves, their mannerisms, their mentality, she said. Feeling at home in Benin, Anelka decided to settle there last July and open a travel agency. She hopes to become a citizen by taking advantage of a law passed in September that grants citizenship to those who can trace their lineage to the slave trade. The new law, which was initiated by President Patrice Talon, who has been in office since 2016, is part of a broader effort by Benin to reckon with its own historical role in the slave trade. The law is open to all over 18 who do not already hold other African citizenship and can provide proof that an ancestor was deported via the slave trade from anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa. Benin's authorities accept
in sub-Saharan Africa, not necessarily, but strictly Beninese.
Right. Well, keep in mind, like,
yeah,
and we
that all
talked about
came
this some
through
years
there, right?
ago. Right, but keep in mind, like, shoot, what was that conference called? I just forgot it. But no, no, but
the you're talking about the Berlin conference or whatever?
Yeah, the Berlin conference. Yeah. So remember, like, and we did a segment on this a couple years ago. Thank you for that, Reef.
Yeah, it's not the brain you want remembering things. You know?
Europe, right. Keep in mind that in Africa, it's mostly, at least traditionally, it's connotated itself by tribes, not by countries. That's what Europe kind of created in order to kind of divvy up land among themselves. So, as for example, I am mostly Igbo, which is now concentrated in Nigeria, but that doesn't mean Igbo necessarily live primarily in Nigeria. They can live, like, or at least back then, you know, they can live in different parts of West Africa. So that's why it's like that. It's because it's kind of associated with tribes, especially if they were more nomadic, weren't necessarily living in one particular area. So that's why it makes sense that basically anywhere within the sub-Saharan Africa, because depending on your tribe, it could be vast, depending where they actually were.
But it's not like,
you know,
any. I mean, I don't know this specifically. If any other sub-Saharan African countries are deciding to do the same thing, you know,
right?
Like,
I would imagine yes, and it more likely makes sense, especially given, you know, even within my DNA test, and there's a branch that I have not looked into yet. Funny enough, it includes Benin, but I don't know where precisely or what tribe precisely on that branch is related to me. So there's only so much that DNA can tell you, which is kind of one of the downfalls of, you know, us losing, or, you know, like, not, or at least not knowing aspects of, you know, our heritage in that regard. So we may not necessarily know specifics. We can only kind of generalize sometimes, depending on if you're lucky enough. But I would imagine too that would be kind of a similar construct in Ghana as well. But anyway, Benin's authorities accept DNA tests, authenticated testimonies, and family records. Anelka used Achukai affiliation in Antillean Creole, a website recognized by Benin to trace her heritage, proving that her ancestors were slaves in Martinique. If her application is successful, she will receive a provisional certificate of nationality valid for 3 years. To get citizenship, she'll be required to stay at least once in Benin during that period. I wonder for how long.
6 weeks, I bet.
maybe.
Seems
I
pretty
probably would
standard.
imagine even less than that, maybe.
Probably.
Maybe like a month,
Yeah.
at least. But Benin is not the first country to grant citizenship to descendants of slaves. Earlier this month, Ghana naturalized 524 African Americans after the West African country's president, Nana Akufo-Addo, invited them to come home in 2019 as part of the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first enslaved Africans in North America in 1619. I said 500 before, but it's 400. But Benin's citizenship law carries added significance in part because of the role it played in slave trade as one of the main points of departure. European merchants deported an estimated 1.5 million slaves from the Bight of Benin, a territory that includes modern-day Benin and Togo and part of modern-day Nigeria, said Ana Lucia Awajo. I know that name. And
Arajo?
Awajo. Yeah.
Sure.
I knew someone in high school who had that name. A professor of history at Howard University who has spent years researching Benin's role. The coastal town of Ouija was one of Africa's most active slave trading ports in the 18th and 19th centuries. Close to 1 million men, women, and children were captured, chained, and forced onto ships there, mainly destined for what will become the United States and Brazil and the Caribbean. Benin has struggled to resolve its legacy of complicity. For over 200 years, powerful kings captured and sold slaves to Portuguese, French, and British merchants. The kingdom still exists today as tribal networks, and so do the groups that were raided. Rumors that President Patrice Talon is a descendant of slave merchants sparked much debate while he was running for office in 2016. Talon has never publicly addressed the rumors. Benin has openly acknowledged its role in slave trade, a stance not shared by many other African nations that participated. In the 1990s, Benin hosted an international conference sponsored by UNESCO to examine how and where slaves were sold. And in 1999, President Matthew Carrico fell to his knees while visiting a church in Baltimore and issuing an apology to African Americans for Africa's involvement in the slave trade. Alongside this national reckoning, memorial tourism centered around the legacy of the slave trade has become a key strategy of Benin's government to attract foreigners. Memorial sites are mostly in Ouija. They include the Door of No Return, which marks the point from which many enslaved people were shipped across the Atlantic, as well as the town's history museum. At the Tree of Forgetfulness, enslaved people were said to be symbolically forced to forget their past lives. Memories of the slave trade are present on both sides of the Atlantic, but only one of these sides is well known, says Sinead Chiquete, the head of Benin's state-run tourism agency. Nate DeBose, 37, an American musician living in New Orleans, learned about Benin's citizenship law while visiting for the Porto Novo Mass Festival. He had never been to West Africa before, but his interest in the Voodoo religion led him there. DeVos is the president of an association called New Orleans National Voodoo Day. It mirrors Benin's Voodoo Day, a national holiday on January 10th, where a festival in Ouija celebrating Voodoo, an official religion in Benin, practiced by at least 1 million people in the country. It originated in the kingdom of Dahomey, in the south. Yeah, so that's that movie, that controversial movie that came out a couple of years ago. That was based on this tribe, that women tribe, in the south of present-day Benin, and revolves around the worship of spirits and ancestors through rituals and offerings. Slavery brought voodoo to the Americas and the Caribbean, where it became voodoo. With a blend with Catholicism.
Similar to Santeria and others.
Yeah. Voodoo is one of the chains that connects Africa to the Americas, said Arajo, the professor. For enslaved Africans, it was a way to resist slavery. European colonial powers and slave owners fought to suppress African cultural and religious practices. Voodoo was preserved through syncretism, as African deities and spirits were merged with or disguised as African saints.
Catholic saints, yeah.
Our African ancestors were not tribal savages. They had very sophisticated cultures with very noble and beautiful spiritual practices, DeBose said. At the end of the day, I am an American, even when I am dressed in the wonderful fabrics and suits they have in Benin, DeVos said. Anelka, the travel agent now living in Benin, says her motivations behind getting Beninese citizenship are mostly symbolic. I know I will never be completely Beninese. I will always be considered a foreigner, she said. But I'm doing this for my ancestors. It is a way to reclaim my heritage, a way of getting reparation. Any thoughts?
I mean, it's nice, you know. Any place willing to give you some dual citizenship and things like that is always lovely, you know, just for traveling and getting outside of your culture and all that jazz anyway, you know. I like that it's like anywhere from sub-Saharan Africa, you know, that they don't necessarily care where exactly, right? We don't have to be that super like, you know, isolated with it, you know?
Right.
So also useful. You know, but would you be interested in going and getting a citizenship there? Even if it's dual citizenship?
I'm a triple citizen already, so
make it quadruple. But why not? You know?
Yeah, well, honestly, I have thought about it. Like, if Nigeria has such a program, I would be interested.
Curious.
Yeah, in terms of, like, I've been to Africa. I haven't been to West Africa yet. That'll be a trip I'll have to make at some point. But yeah, I do agree with what Anelka said. It'll be mostly be symbolic for me in terms of, you know, like, yeah, I'm not Nigerian. That's like, I'm not Igbo. I'm not Yoruba. Like, I'm descended from those tribes, sure, but I don't know the culture. I don't know the languages. You know, I know nothing of those cultures, and I'll admit, and actually that's something I probably should research a little bit more. But it's still the idea, and like, I know, you know, in terms of the reparations discussion that's being had online, and I know that there's going to be some people who are not going to like what I'm going to say, but I don't care. But the idea of reparations that I do see online, and I know you've seen online, has been in terms of money.
Yeah,
primarily.
And only that.
And only that. And we'll get into this later in the next segment in terms of, I know, especially for African Americans, it's the idea of we were promised 40 acres and a mule.
Right.
Like, but we have to kind of break that down as to what that meant. It didn't necessarily, like, I think the most simple answer to that is money, but it's a lot more deeper than that. Like, the idea of 40 acres and a mule, that was essentially land and transportation. Essentially, the two things at that time in the 1800s that you needed for generational wealth. So it wasn't just money in the sense of whatever it's in your wallet. It's the idea of, like, being able to pass shit down to future generations so that you're able to build capital for yourself. And so, and we see that, you know, that's the issue that I have with the establishment, because a lot of these corporations are where they are now because they were built off of the idea of exploiting my ancestors. So they were able to build generational wealth in that regard off our back. So the idea of reparations for Black people in this case, and I'm going to get a little bit more about reparations, like macro level in terms of class, which we've talked about a lot on the show and privately. But as it relates to Black people living in the West, we have not had the opportunities to build generational wealth in the same way that other cultures who might have immigrated, and even certain cultures who,
I think for me, that's like,
you can argue well, one second. Even other cultures who may have come here via, like, you can argue, like, indentured servanthood, essentially, had more of a means to gain generational wealth, even though it might have been limited, but they still had that opportunity. In America, you know, whenever there may have been groups of African Americans who attempted to gain generational wealth, has been destroyed. We know you hear about Tulsa, for example, like Black Wall Street is one example. So, you know, so I think, and I'm personally kind of getting tired of just relating it to just cut the check. You hear that a lot, like just giving my money, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Which brings me into, now this went viral online, and I know this kind of got some different takes online.
Well, before
but I did want to
head into that,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that I feel like that's somewhat partially my, like, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but it's like that I have a problem with the need for wealth, right? Like in this context, you know, like I feel like we should be fighting so that people don't need to have the wealth, you know, but like I feel you, you know,
right. Well, so, let's go into this clip because, so this is Dr. Umar Johnson. He's a Pan-African activist. Now, I'm going to preface by saying he's goofy as fuck. Like, I do not agree with a lot of what he says at times. And look, bruh, when are you going to get your school together, bruh? Like, he's been trying to build a school in Maryland now for the last decade. And as of now, I still yet to hear about this school opening. So he has done a lot of goofy shit, and he says a lot of goofy shit. But I'm going to be fair here. And he's going to say stuff that I know kind of triggered like a few folks online. I have a slightly different take. Not slightly. I do have a different take. So let's see what he says. And this is regarding reparations, at least on the online discourse of reparations that we see among Black people online. So let's see what he says.
The message in Killmonger to Africa was, don't let these woke Negroes over there. Yeah, they read all the books and they know all the history, but they don't respect African culture. They've been Europeanized and they filled with hatred, like Killmonger. If you let Black America come back to Africa, they will destroy your society. There was coded messages in Black Panther for different African populations around the world. Now let's look at Prince T'Challa, right? Rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman. His character, the Black Panther, was what? Selfish, stingy. He was a nationalist, but he wasn't a Pan-Africanist. He didn't care about Black people outside of Wakanda. Y'all remember that? Yeah. Remember when Lupita kept trying to get him to go help? She said, we got everything in Wakanda. Let's go help our brothers and sisters in America. Prince T'Challa said, we don't give a damn about them.
Yeah, he did.
You follow what I'm saying? So that was a message to Black America that Africa don't want your ass. Y'all can keep wearing dashikis and changing your name and getting locks. They don't want you. So the messages, I think, were very damaging and destructive to the aspirations of Black people on both sides of the water. And let's be clear, this was not a coincidence. Black Panther came out in 2017, was it? 2018?
2018, I want to say.
What was the very next year after Black Panther came out? The year of return. 1619 to 2019. 400 years of African people in the diaspora relocated from slavery. Are you going to tell me it's a coincidence that you bring a movie out? You bring a movie out the year before the quadricentennial of Black slavery. You bring a movie out that tells Africans, Black Americans are no good for you, and tell Black Americans, Africans are no good for you. Look at this now. Killmonger is the metaphorical Black man in America. Prince T'Challa, the metaphorical Black man in Africa. You don't want to be bothered with him, and you don't want to be bothered with him. Now let's bring it home. CIA agent Ross, remember the white boy? Yep. At the end of the day, he flies the plane in. He really saves the day. Can I ask y'all a question? How can a CIA agent be a hero in an African movie when the CIA assassinated every major Black leader we had in America, Africa, Central South America, and the Caribbean. They got Maurice Bishop assassinated. They was implicated in Walter Rodney. They got Malcolm killed, King killed. They the ones who got Garvey thrown out of America. They the ones who had Patrice Lumumba assassinated. They helped Nelson Mandela get arrested. The CIA destroyed the Black Liberation Movement. And you mean to tell me you got a Black Panther movie with an organization responsible for killing every major Black leader saves the fucking day?
You know what? This was the wrong clip. This was the wrong clip. I put up the wrong clip. But either way,
the message in Killmonger.
It might not have been you. Hold on. Because like the PowerPoint wouldn't play this one. This
that's
one.
the one, yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't play this one. Let's see if it's actually in the. Hold on. Let's see if it plays it here.
Okay.
Nope. Can you see me like the tweet? No, pull it up.
Sure. Let me see if I can find it. But
while you talk.
Yeah. You probably put in Dr. Umar reparations and see what pops up.
Yeah.
But no,
where I get the Wakandan special herb from. Where do we get that? You know, what's that herb called? I forget.
It's
power herb.
Yeah. It's no special name. It's just the herb, I guess. I'm trying to remember the movie. It's been a while since I've seen either Black Panther movies. But you know what? But even within that clip, again, I posted the wrong clip. Like, he has a point in terms of, you know, Black Panther came out in 2018, and like there was this whole thing of Africa pride and, you know, people wanting to go back and all that kind of stuff. But within the movie, it was, you know, like, and it was the idea of, you know, Agent Ross. Was it Agent Ross? Yeah, Agent Ross.
I think
Luke basically had the supporting role of wait, no, that's not it.
No.
No, that's not it. That was the same one.
Yeah.
Prince, that's Biggie, that's Pac.
Not that one, though, right? Okay.
No, not one.
Keep looking.
I could probably find it too.
On the topic of reparations, this.
Yeah, hold on.
This one.
Yeah, that's it.
Cool. That's what I said.
Because you're right.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
If you are asking for cash, then your reparations list ain't worth much.
That's what I said.
Because your reparations list should put you in a position to make all the money you want on your own. What you need to pay out from info. But Black people are so worried about money that we can't see the bigger picture. We also fail to recognize that reparations is not just for us living. It's for those gone and those not yet here.
Come on.
I ain't heard nobody talk about how much we're going to put to the side for the generations unborn yet.
Facts.
And that's why I believe that this generation of Blacks in America, we shouldn't get the reparations. We are too irresponsible.
Ain't ready.
We will waste it.
Yeah.
Put the reparations in a trust somewhere until we get a more revolutionary, more conscious group of Blacks. Let them decide what to do with it. We ain't there.
Yeah.
Look at all the bunny hopping and we do. What we doing with reparations?
Easter Sunday.
No. So we can blow the money. I had a sister text me one day. You know what she said? Can you stop talking against reparations? Because I need that money to pay my bills.
Oh, man. Short-minded.
Reparations is to repair, not to pay your damn weed bill.
Fix my debt.
Oh, man.
Right. And so that was the clip. So that got a lot of heat online because people were like, how dare you say we don't deserve that, we don't deserve reparations and all this kind of stuff. And like, you know,
which I get.
Call them everything. But I get that. And I know people are not going to like what I'm going to say, but I think he has a point there. Because if you're trying to make this about money, 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 give me my money right now, yeah, like let's say if Black people got their reparations tomorrow, what are people going to do with it? Like, I shudder to think, like, okay, so let's say you pay off your bills, you get the car, you buy a house, like the superficial things. Okay, fine. Like,
yeah,
and I know people say,
all that
once
money's
you get
gonna
the money,
trickle up to the landlord.
That number one. Number two, like, and I've said this to you, it's a version of Black capitalism or consumerism that I'm not sure I'm for.
Right.
Because we don't necessarily talk. And just to give an example, like, I went to Toronto a couple of weeks ago during break. And it's funny, like in a lot of major cities, there would be like a Chinatown or a little insert here, country here, like a little Italy, so even though they don't hold that same, value, not in the same way, but at least back in the day, these neighborhoods in these cities were key in kind of keeping,
specifically is kind of what you're talking
right,
about.
kind of keeping, like the wealth generally within the community.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we see a lot of these insert little country here in a lot of cities now, at least back then. We don't have necessarily anything like that equivalent to Black people, now in these cities. If anything, if you go to the hood, and I don't want to use the hood as an example, but it's not guaranteed you're going to see Black people owning the businesses. You might see other cultures owning a lot of these businesses. Like, I know, for example, in my hometown in New Jersey, there's a Caribbean market that I know a lot of Black people too. Like, it's owned by a Chinese family.
Right.
So
like,
just to kind of give
classically,
you,
the man running the bodega will always be called a now, regardless of who's running it, because it was run by like Lebanese and Syrians and all called Ahmed.
Right. But what I think Dr. Umar is saying here, and in this instance, I do agree, like, getting reparations, at least in our headspace right now, would create a consumeristic mindset versus
I also
an
feel like there's this thing about symbolically getting it. I think that is a factor for people too, where it's like they're willing to accept the most basic, minimal form of whatever it would be,
Right.
Like, and see, this is my like, if we're gonna fight for things, I feel like just fighting the class problem anyway,
Right.
Because like, then we can worry about the specifics of, well, we need to fix this, debt owed here. You know what I mean?
Right.
How can we do that in a way that's meaningful and whatever, while also, I mean, the issue is that no one is taking care of anyone at this point.
Right.
You
which kind of brings up the point that I wanted to make.
Yeah.
And I know I've had a lot of conversations with you about this. And actually, I do want to thank you and shout out to Oz, if you're still in the chat, for helping me think about this. And actually, within the last couple of weeks, I've thought about this a little more. I know people in the chat have also mentioned this too, as far as reparations for like other cultures. It may not be on the same degree as, Black people, but there's still this idea of, like, if we're talking on a class level, there are certain things, even for you, like you're a Southern white guy, but you haven't necessarily gotten the full advantages of certain attributes that maybe someone else would, and you're white. So, and you can argue, like, especially right now, like, we don't have universal health care in this country. We don't have a living wage in this country. Like, we have people struggling. You're not afforded necessarily to get a decent education. So the idea of reparations is to repair. Another word I want to kind of associate that is justice. So, and justice basically means fixing the system so that everyone has, you know, an equal playing field, more or less. So if we're going to do that for Black people, and I feel like if we're going to do this for Black people, and people are going to disagree with me on this, but I do think the discussion has to be had, because we talk about this a lot. Like if we talk about the class issue, that affects all of us. So my thing is, and I feel like I've kind of been evolving on this, even on this issue with over the last year or so. Like, is there a way to maybe do both? Is there a way to acknowledge the pain and like the suffering that my ancestors had to experience, that they haven't been able to really participate in the fullness of what it means to have a true democracy in the West, while at the same time acknowledging, like, on a macro level, people regardless are struggling. Again, it's not on the same plane, but there's still issues as far as justice within our democracy that most of us are experiencing in different ways. And how can we fix all of it? And I've been looking up MLK, and I think even MLK, and that might be something I want to kind of bring up maybe later on in the month if I write this article. Like even he was kind of having that question, like as far as reparations, like what would that mean in terms of the Black community, but how does that relate to everybody on a class issue?
And the minute he started thinking about it as a class issue, what happened? Like
boom, boom.
These things happened. So you know.
So, but regardless, if we want to talk specifically within the Black community, I think we can do better in terms of, and this is, I think, a discussion that must be had, like, what are ways, if we were to get reparations, what would that look like for us? Like, granted, I'm not opposed to if you get some money or whatever it is, like, yeah, you have a right to spend it however you want or need to.
And if you're going to ask for the money too, ask for the whole damn hog. I want the numbers crunched with interest laid out. Like, I don't want any arguments. Like, that's
right.
It should be, here's this, and while you're at it, do it for all the other, the indentured servants, the Asian people who built the railroads, the Irish who built the skyscrapers. Do it for all of them. You know, because you're going to have a much bigger block of people to then engage with when you want to pressure whoever you're going to try and pressure to do this, which is my other problem with this, because we can't pressure anybody to do the things we need right now, you know?
Right.
Like, so, you know.
And, but I do feel like, but I think within the Black community, I think we need to do a better job of being more strategic. And I think these conversations should be included of how this relates to class. But more specifically within our community, what does reparations for us look like besides just the consumeristic aspect of it? Like, yeah, people are going to get excited with potentially, you know, like I can pay my bills, or I can buy this and all that kind of stuff. But as Dr. Umar said, what benefit is getting all this money, quote unquote, if you're going to consume it and not necessarily invest in it for, again, the idea of generational wealth? That, and we talk about this as far within the progressive movement, it's the idea of like, how can you build upon something that's good and make it better? Like, how can we ensure that Black people are not, you know, are having the things that they're able to thrive in the West? And then along with that, how does that include Africa in this? Like, if you want to, you know, if you want to travel home, your whole ancestral home, you know, you should have the means to do that. Like, so I'm not knocking out Africa. I think if anything, Africa has a lot
Need
to
to be
say
a part
too
of it.
in their hand on their slave trade
Yep.
as well, you know. But
And
that
it's an
should also be an
international
option.
issue. I think if you're going to pressure anyone, places like the ICJ and things like that, actually setting some stuff in stone, so that then you can use that to enter other countries that are forced to listen to it, you know. But I brought this because why not bring Fred Hampton into this conversation, you know?
Yeah.
So I'll let him speak his mind.
Mad about it. What makes them mad about it is that they have black people and white poor people and red poor people and Puerto Rican poor people and Latin American Puerto Rican people of poor people of all descents. They had them caught up in movements based on racism when the Black Panther Party stood up and said that we don't care what anybody says. We don't think you fight fire with fire best. We think you fight fire with water best. We're going to fight racism, not with racism, but we're going to fight with solidarity. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. We stood up and said we're not going to fight reactionary pigs and reactionary state's attorneys like this and reactionary state's attorneys like Hanrahan with any other reactions on our part. We're going to fight their reactions where all of us people are getting together and have an international proletarian revolution. Right on. Right on. And that's saying all power to the people. Right on. That's saying that no matter what color you are, there's only two classes. And that's saying there's a class over here and there's a class over there. And the reason that this class over here has never did anything to get this class off its back, because this is lower, this is upper. This is the oppressed, this is the oppressor. This is the exploited, this is the exploiter. And these people in this class have divided themselves. They say, I'm black and I hate white people. I'm white and I hate black people. I'm Latin American and I hate hillbillies. I'm hillbilly and I hate Indians. So we fighting amongst each other. And you've heard the testimony of pigs here, and you got pigs of all colors, you know that. You got pigs that are white, you got pigs that are black, you even got pigs that are black and white. Propagating the same type of madness that this buffoon Hanrahan would be propagating if he were here himself. And why? Because they want to keep you to believing that I'm your enemy, and that everybody else that's black and that wears a lot of hair on his head and hair on his face, they want to keep you thinking that he's your enemy. Why? Because if ever you would disregard him and overlook him just for a minute and throw away that question of racism and start dealing with a little logic, then there would be no one else you could attack other than Hanrahan, other than Davy, and other than Tricky Dicky Nixon. If you make the right decision, then the oppressed people of the world get complete satisfaction. I know you return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's kind of my concern in a lot of ways with reparations, at least the way it's presented. It's like the way to solve capitalism is to give it to black people just willy-nilly, and the potential is you're kind of going to create black capitalism. So, and I don't want to go as far as say socialism. I don't think it necessarily has to be that, but should be a way, I think, especially for black people, to kind of thinking about more so for us, how to own the means of production in terms of what that entails within our communities, in our schools, in our cities, in our town. Like, what would that mean for us? But then kind of bring that conversation to everyone else in terms of what would this mean for everybody else? I don't want to necessarily call it reparations for everybody in the way it is, but in the terms of how can we have that justice that every person who is of a lower class does deserve. And I think if we're able to kind of make that tie-in, because I do agree with you that the idea, and you've said this to me personally, the idea of reparations, while you might agree with it, you feel excluded from that because it's like, oh, the black people get this, why don't I get this? And I definitely do agree with you on that. And I think that's why it's not. But if we're talking about it as a class issue versus a race issue, and not to say like, that's what most of us are able to identify with in that way. So how can we flip the language somewhat in terms of, I understand as a black person living in the West that this is the issues that you're going through, and you need justice in terms of these things in this way. But I also understand, given your situation as a white person, you may not have necessarily fully benefited from a lot of stuff given your class, that you're going to benefit in maybe another way or a similar way. So I think there needs to be that conversation ultimately, and not just. But as I said, the idea of it, I think for a Black person, including the idea of returning home if they wanted to, should also be a part of that. And it's sad to me that, just even within the Black American community, like, look, and I get the whole FBA ADOS thing in terms of like, it's an identity group. I totally get that. And I more than understand that. That being said, and you have more than one identity, and everyone has more than one.
Isolated.
Right.
So like even
right.
Like to me, it's like I'm trying to look at like how do I expand my like allies in this to
right. Exactly. How can you expand your horizons beyond what you know or what you've been grown to understand, and how can you connect with different people? Like, so for me, it's like, it's one thing if you know that you have African heritage and you might go and figure out like your tribes or whatever and go whatever. And not to say if you reject it, but if you know that and kind of say, as these guys are saying, I know I'm not, as I said, I'm not Nigerian, but I do identify with the fact that I have Nigerian ancestry in me. And I know, given in that context, my story does not start in Barbados or Trinidad or in Grenada, like in the case of my family. Like, it starts in Nigeria, it starts in Cameroon, and probably other countries that I don't know of. Like, just to give me that perspective and be able to connect better there. So it kind of saddens me that there's a lot of this bullshit in terms of like, we, like, built up the West, and like, we built up this country for what it is. And it's like, that's not unique to this country, number one. And number two, you didn't build that because you were exploited to do it.
Right.
The idea that you built that connotates the will to do it. You didn't have the free will to do it. You were forced to do it. So you really didn't build anything, at least not for you.
Like, you were,
so
and in that case, then you were just as exploited as the other people who were exploited in that system to also, like, you know what I mean? Like, this is my frustration with the entire, like, because to me, it always goes back to the class side of things,
Yeah.
Like, which is why Fred Hampton was like, it's why the Black Panthers went, nope, I'm going to like push for what he called socialism, which we both know is the safe way to say communism then, like, so that to me is the thing people should be talking about. If they're worried about those issues, it's talk about those struggles and talk about what is now being used to exploit you and exploit everybody. Right. We're going to do that in our next segment and the segment after that,
Right.
Right.
And then,
and
like,
also,
now, even in
also
Africa,
read some of those economists who might have thought differently. You know what I'm saying?
Right. We've talked a lot of stories on how Africa currently is being exploited still in terms of the resources. And like, and it kind of saddens me. It's like African Americans are shitting on Africans. And look, it happens on both sides, whatever. But on the same breath, both groups are being exploited.
I also feel like, how much is that actually happening, or is that just a vocal minority online? I don't think you see the average person actually doing that. I mean, I could be wrong. I've not experienced the same things you have.
I said this to somebody online. I've had my dad say some things about,
sure.
To be fair, my dad will kind of go across the board, just basically being like, Black people or what is wrong. That's what he always says to me. What is wrong with our people? What is wrong with our people?
But I've also heard him literally tell you, American, what's wrong with Americans? And it's like, yes.
Right. So he will do both.
Right.
But like, so he will go regardless. But
I get it.
I think in the context, it's just like us as a community, like, what the hell are we doing?
Right.
And he might give specifics in terms of, America about to do this, Africans might do this, like he'll everyone within the community is a fair target.
The Caribbean community has got all their stuff together either,
No,
like they're
absolutely
we could take over some islands a bit more,
right,
but
no. So, but yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting, and I wanted to bring this up because I just hear a lot online. It's like, well, Africa's not doing anything for us. Well, they're offering you citizenship for people who want to have it. So take that what you will. And again, is even with these two people who say, no, I'm not of this African nation in the traditional way, but I recognize that roots is within me, and like I want to honor that in terms of my ancestors. So you can be very much big, bold Black American and still be connected to your roots in that way too, and that's okay. Conversely, if you don't want anything to do with it, I would argue it's okay too. But I challenge people to understand, like, your story does not begin here, contrary to what you're trying to make up within these communities. Like, you do have a history on the continent that if you want to, you can find out if you really want to dive more. And if you choose to, fine, but you need to have that understanding of there's more to your story than what lies in America. And in order to figure out what your future is going to be, you need to figure out your past, the fullness of it.
I sent you a Malcolm quote. Malcolm X doesn't understand what is going on in Mississippi if you don't understand what's going on in the Congo. And if you can't understand what's going on in the Congo, unless you understand what is going on in Mississippi. Like,
right.
You got to do it all. You know, you got to be well-rounded.
Yeah.
So,
and again, and I think that's the danger of Americanism, is that we tend to be very isolated. So, and I see that within my community, which saddens me, but that's why I'm here, to kind of bring some light into that for people who are willing to listen. So, but talking about stories like this or talking about segments like this is why we're demonetized. And I'm probably going to get a lot of hate on this on Twitter, but I don't give a fuck. So regardless, if you want to support us, so we're able to continue talking about stories and issues in this way. If you have a smartphone, please scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the website you see at the bottom of your screen there. Or if you're in the YouTube chat, please type in !donate. The link will come up and you can give to the Ko-fi website directly. As little as $1 helps in order to support the channel. And if you cannot support financially, we understand that you can share our content, subscribe to our content, and make sure you leave a comment. Let us know what you think. I'm seeing in the chat that there's a lot of discussion regarding this topic. So let us know how you feel. How do you feel about what Dr. Umar said? I know, like, there are people, I see a lot that it's been very mixed of what I see online. But let us know what you think. And just in terms of the reparation discussion, how do you feel about it in terms of the Black community, or how do you feel about it in terms of a class issue? Let us know in the comments if you're watching this as a segment, and help us get to free K so we're able to continue growing. We're able to continue growing and producing content like this. And thanks for watching.